Hey, thanks for watching The Creative Underground. I'm Paul Carhart. Last week we colored one of the new Elvin's Pet Peeve comic strips, and there's a second part to that, and I'm going to try a little bit of a different way of capturing it this time and do some video capture instead of the camera right over my shoulder. So we're going to do that to the second Elvin's Pet Peeve, brand new Elvin's Pet Peeve comic strip, which is the second part to the first one that we did last time. So let's just Bob Ross this thing here. I'll just talk you through it. I've got this thing running at about 4 times the actual speed that I actually do this at. Um, so it won't bore you to death. So I scan these things. I actually draw these things old school on a piece of artboard with blue line and then ink it by hand. So I scan them, and the picture is actually bigger than what my scanner window is. So I have to scan it in 2 pieces, and I got to piece it together. So I piece it together. I give one side about a 50% opacity, so that way it's kind of blurry when it first comes on, and then I nudge it around until it's not blurry anymore. I bring the opacity back up, and then I do some brightness contrast tricks to get rid of the dark edges caused by the edges of the scanner window, because the artboard actually is too thick for the scanner, so a little bit of light gets in. So I get rid of all that as well using the brightness contrast features of Photoshop. That's what I'm in Adobe Photoshop. It's industry standard for advertising, for retouching photos, whatever. I cropped the thing down, so now I'm working with pretty much my size on my comic strip. And then I want to save that, and I want to save a version of it that will be black and white, because I'm going to keep that. And I also want I have the original scan basically, and I also want to save one that I'm going to colorize. So that's the other thing that I want to do. So I'm going to have 2 files when I'm done. One that's color, one that's black and white. So then I go out and I get, since this is the second part of a 2-part comic strip, we've already established a lot of the colors in the previous version. So I want to open that up, and I want to get some of my colors, use that as a palette for colorizing these same characters in the second half of the comic strip. So I move that off to the side, and I'll be referencing it as we go here. So I'm using the darken setting in the pen tool, and I'm using 100% opacity, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to colorize, the same colors that I used before, basically. I like to use, when I'm doing this, the darken setting so that all my ink stuff stands out. I'm actually screwing up here and accidentally getting hold of my erase tool. But so yeah, here I go, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to colorize right up to the edges of all the dark black. This color, this is skin color. Then I'm going to, use that wherever there's skin, and then I'm going to go back and get his hair color from the other one. I'm going to come in and put his hair color in, so that the colors will match exactly from frame to frame. I've got a different color for a shirt than I went and got, slightly different color. And I'm going to go through and do the whole thing. As long as I've got the color, I might as well go through and color it everywhere I know it needs to be that color. There may be some little tiny corners that may crop up later on that require the color, but and I did the tongue while I was at it. But using the darken, I can just go straight over these black lines and anti-aliases those lines to the color. I used the brown from his shoes for that, because that was black and the other one it was smaller, less detail. And here I went and got the green from his hat, and I'm putting that on as well. So that's pretty much him. That's Elvin. And then his friend is Gerard the dwarf. So he's a little bit more complex. He's got a gradient, kind of a drunkard's nose, and a gradient gray to his beard as well. So, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the skin color like I did for Elvin, and go in and give that everywhere I can. Like I said, this is a lot faster going than I actually do. Shrink the brush down a little bit to do that. And I realized I didn't do Elvin's hand, so I did that, went back and got that. Then I'm going to do his clothes. I think I start with his pants here, which is just a little corner. Then I got a plum color for his shirt. A lot of these characters were colorized for the very first time in the first panel I did on the last video, because these things were always drawn in black and white back in the 90s. So other than a few t-shirts I did with Peeve, there were no colors. So I wanted him to have a sort of a more modern, hot yellow hard hat. And then his eyes match the color of his lens on his hat. He's got very dark lids because he's always tired and sleepy. And his tongue is about the same as everyone else's tongue. I'll do his other sleeve, the plum color, and get it all up and around his head there. Some areas I didn't fully ink the outline of the other side of his head, so I just have to fill it in with color where it goes. Then I'm going to do his nose and his beard on a separate layer. So that if I want to go in and, because I'm using basically a soft airbrush, I'm getting that, and then I want to go around the edges of it and erase the airbrush edges. And sometimes you can't see them all, so I actually will put in a black layer, and then I can see, okay, that's where it all goes. Okay, make sure it's all cleaned up around the outside of it. And then I'll do his nose the same way, just a little, gradient there. And then I got to get the sky in there, because we're on a close-up. I'm using the sky as the background and not the green hill. So, yeah, it's not that difficult to do. It's just exactly what I did with the interior of the characters, except now I'm doing it with the sky. So, yeah, that's pretty much the coloring of this thing. I used a different way of doing this. I'm going to try to use this from now on when I'm doing on-screen stuff. I think even with music, I'm going to try to capture the actual screen rather than have the camera over my shoulder. I figured out how to do it. So this is a much nicer way of doing it, I think. And you can see more, and it's bigger on the screen, and there's no glare. So I think it's a much better way for you guys to see what's going on. So I'm really glad I figured out how to do this. And that's why I wanted to go ahead and do one that's very similar to the last one, just to get one under my belt doing this. So again, I want to thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to share this thing with your friends, and make sure you subscribe and your friends subscribe. I'm trying to get it to a point at least where I can get my own URL for this channel. So I really would appreciate your support and your help. And I hope you guys like the Elvin's Pet Peeve comic strips. Make sure you go check these things out. They're at paulcarhart.com, www.paulcarhart.com, and just click on the little green Peeve character up in the top right corner, and you'll see all the different comic strips. A lot of them are from the 90s, the original ones, and then there's also the new ones that I've been working on. Thanks again for watching The Creative Underground, and I'll see you on the next video.